Have you ever stopped to realize that your most intimate decisions are not really yours? That purchase you made yesterday, apparently on impulse, the political opinion you defend with such conviction, the movie you chose to watch on Netflix, even the person you fell in love with, there's a disturbing possibility that none of these choices were genuinely yours. And the most frightening part is that you didn't even notice you were being directed. It's as if we lived in an invisible matrix where we believe we're in control while being subtly guided by forces we can barely identify. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the reality of power in the 21st century, where those who control no longer need armies or parliaments. They just need your attention. And once they have your attention, they have something much more valuable than your vote or your obedience. They have your mind. For millennia, power functioned in a relatively simple and brutal way. Kings built castles, generals commanded legions, emperors dominated territories. Control was physical, geographical, visible. If you wanted to govern, you needed to conquer cities, occupy palaces, sit on thrones. Power had a fixed address and a known face. Napoleon couldn't influence a peasant in Russia without first marching his armies there. Hitler had to invade entire countries to impose his will. Stalin built a massive state apparatus to watch and control every Soviet citizen. Even the great public opinion manipulators of the 20th century, like Edward Bernays, depended on newspapers, radios, and televisions that were still controlled by few and consumed by many at specific times. But something changed fundamentally in the last 2 decades. Power became dematerialized. It became invisible, ubiquitous, subtle. You no longer need to occupy the presidential palace to govern a country. You just need to occupy the minds of its inhabitants. And this occupation doesn't happen through soldiers marching in the streets or propagandists shouting in public squares. It happens through algorithms whispering in our ears while we scroll infinitely through personalized feeds, absorbing information that seems casual but was carefully selected to shape our thoughts, desires, and behaviors. Consider for a moment what really happens when you open your smartphone in the morning. Before you even brush your teeth, you've already been exposed to dozens of pieces of information chosen specifically for you by artificial intelligence systems that know your mental patterns better than you do yourself. These pieces of information are not neutral. Every news item, every video, every post that appears on your timeline was selected to maximize your engagement, your time on the platform, your predisposition towards certain consumption behaviors, and even certain political positions. It's as if you had an invisible personal advisor who, instead of organizing your schedule, organizes your thoughts. The genius of this new model of power lies in its invisibility and the sense of freedom it provides. No one is forcing you to do anything. You can choose not to open Facebook, not to buy from Amazon, not to watch YouTube. Technically, you have complete freedom, but this freedom is a carefully constructed illusion. It's like being in a maze where all the walls are transparent and you can see all the exits, but somehow you always end up following the same path, making the same decisions, reaching the same conclusions. The difference is that now the maze is in your mind, not outside. And here we arrive at the most disturbing point of this transformation. The new holders of power have discovered something that ancient emperors never knew. It's much more efficient to control what people want than to control what they can do. A traditional dictator needs to spend enormous resources building prisons, training soldiers, maintaining surveillance systems. But if you can make people want exactly what you want them to do, they become your voluntary collaborators. They work for you for free, defend your interests as if they were their own, and are even grateful for the opportunity. Let me pause for a moment to ask you directly. When was the last time you deeply questioned where your most basic desires come from? That urge to check your phone every few minutes, to consume more information, to compare your life with others on social media. Have you ever wondered if these impulses are really yours or if they were carefully planted and cultivated? I know this can be an uncomfortable reflection because it questions the very foundation of our sense of autonomy. But if this thought resonates with something you've been feeling, a vague uneasiness about not being fully in command of your own thoughts and choices, share in the comments, I question the origin of my desires when your honesty can help others realize they're not alone in this experience of feeling subtly manipulated by forces they can barely identify. What makes this new form of control even more sophisticated is its ability to adapt individually to each person. A traditional dictator had to use the same propaganda techniques for millions of people, hoping they would work on average. But modern algorithms know you better than your own family. They know what type of content makes you stay online longer, what keywords make you click, what types of images capture your attention, what times of day you're most vulnerable to external influences. It's as if each person had their own personal dictator, invisible and tireless, working 24 hours a day to shape their thoughts according to interests that are not necessarily theirs. And perhaps the most brilliant aspect of this new architecture of power is that it doesn't depend on any charismatic leader or specific government. The algorithms keep working regardless of who's in political power. They are more stable than any regime, more enduring than any dynasty. A president can be elected or overthrown, but Facebook continues shaping public opinion. A prime minister can resign, but Google continues determining what information billions of people have access to. A revolution can topple a government, but Netflix continues influencing how people see the world through the stories it chooses to tell. This brings us to a fundamental question. If real power is no longer in traditional governments, where is it? The answer is simultaneously simple and terrifying. It's dispersed among a few technology corporations that control the infrastructure of human attention. They don't need to declare war on other countries because they've already conquered the most valuable territory of the 21st century, the interior of the human mind. And they conquered this territory not through invasions or violence, but through convenience and pleasure. They offered tools so useful, entertainment so addictive, social connections so satisfying, that we voluntarily handed over our attention, our data, our mental privacy. But here lies a fascinating paradox. The more connected we become through this technology, the more isolated we become from our own inner experience. We spend so much time consuming content produced by others, reacting to external stimuli, seeking validation on digital platforms, that we lose contact with our own genuine thoughts, feelings, and intuitions. It's as if we outsourced our inner life to algorithms that tell us what to think, feel, and desire. And we do this voluntarily because it seems easier, more efficient, less anguishing than facing the silence and complexity of our own mind. This outsourcing of inner life has profound consequences we're only beginning to understand. When we delegate our decisions to automated systems, when we allow algorithms to determine what information we receive, what products we buy, even who we date through dating apps, we're essentially abdicating our humanity. Not in the dramatic and apocalyptic sense, but in the more subtle and perhaps more dangerous sense, we're stopping exercising our muscles of discernment, reflection, and conscious choice. It's as if we were gradually atrophying our capacity for internal self-governance. Just as our physical muscles weaken when we stop using them, our capacity for focused attention, deep reflection, and autonomous decision-making deteriorates when we constantly delegate these functions to external systems. And what's most concerning is that this atrophy is not just individual, but collective. An entire generation is growing up without fully developing these fundamental capacities of human consciousness. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of this new reality is how it presents itself as evolution and progress. We are constantly bombarded with narratives about how technology is making us smarter, more informed, more connected. And in many ways, this is true. We have access to more information than any previous generation. We can communicate instantly with people around the world. We have incredibly powerful tools in the palm of our hand. But at the same time, paradoxically, we're becoming less capable of using our own intelligence independently. It's as if we had developed mental prostheses so sophisticated that our natural mental muscles began to atrophy. We can no longer navigate without GPS, calculate without a calculator, remember phone numbers without an electronic address book, and more subtly, we can no longer form opinions without consulting news feeds, make decisions without seeking online validation, or simply be alone with our thoughts without seeking constant external stimulation. This brings us to a crucial question. If we recognize that our attention and our capacity for reflection are being subtly manipulated and colonized, what can we do about it? The first answer many people consider is simply to disconnect, abandon digital platforms, return to a simpler lifestyle. And while periods of disconnection are extremely valuable, total disconnection is not a realistic solution for most people in the modern world. Nor would it necessarily be desirable, since these technologies also bring real benefits and genuine opportunities for connection and learning. The real solution, I believe, lies in developing a new form of literacy, attention literacy. Just as we learn to read and write, to navigate the world of written words, we need to learn to consciously manage our attention to navigate the digital world. This means developing the capacity to perceive when our attention is being captured, understand the mechanisms by which this happens, and cultivate the ability to direct our attention intentionally instead of simply reacting to the stimuli presented to us. This new literacy is not just an individual skill, but an urgent democratic necessity. If an entire population is having their thoughts and desires shaped by algorithms controlled by a few corporations, then the very foundation of democracy, which depends on citizens capable of independent reflection and conscious choice, is at risk. We cannot have a truly democratic society if its members are not capable of autonomous thinking. And here we find a fascinating historical irony. In many ways, we are returning to a pre-modern form of social organization where the vast majority of people simply accept and follow the narratives and guidelines presented to them by a small elite. The difference is that in the medieval world, this elite were kings and priests who at least had faces and could be held accountable for their actions. Today, our ruling elite are faceless algorithms created by corporations that operate in almost total opacity. But perhaps the most profound change that this new form of power represents is in the very nature of truth and knowledge. In the pre-digital world, although there was propaganda and manipulation, there was still a certain shared objectivity about the basic facts of reality. Now, we live in completely different informational universes, shaped by the algorithms that determine what information each person receives. Two people can live in the same city, speak the same language, but inhabit completely different realities constructed by the personalized feeds they consume. This creates a phenomenon we can call collective schizophrenia, where not just individuals, but entire societies lose contact with a shared reality. And when this happens, democratic dialogue becomes impossible because people are no longer talking about the same world. They're talking about customized versions of reality that were built specifically for them by systems that optimize not for truth or common good, but for engagement and profit. This fragmentation of shared reality has consequences that go far beyond politics. It affects our capacity for cooperation, our ability to solve collective problems, our possibility of building social trust. When each person inhabits their own informational bubble, built by algorithms to maximize their emotional engagement, we lose the common ground necessary for civilized life. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this new reality is that it is self-reinforcing. The more fragmented our collective perception of reality becomes, the more we depend on algorithms to navigate the resulting complexity, and the more we depend on these algorithms, the more fragmented our perception becomes. It's a cycle that accelerates, creating a downward spiral toward a society where independent thinking and genuine dialogue become practically impossible. I need to stop here for a moment and ask directly, which aspect of this transformation worries you most? The loss of personal autonomy, the fragmentation of social reality, or perhaps something even deeper that you feel but have difficulty naming? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps because we don't know exactly how to articulate them, or because we fear seeming paranoid. But these concerns are valid and urgent. If you'd like to share, write in the comments. My biggest concern about our digital reality is your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss these collective challenges we all face, but rarely talk about openly. But not all is lost. In fact, I believe we are living through a unique historical moment where we still have the opportunity to consciously choose what direction we want our species to take. We can continue on the current trajectory, progressively handing over more of our mental autonomy to automated systems, or we can make the collective decision to reclaim and cultivate our fundamental human capacities. The first thing we need to do is recognize that attention has become the scarcest and most valuable resource of the 21st century. In the industrial world, the most important resource was physical capital. Factories, machines, raw materials. In the post-industrial world, it was knowledge and information, but in the digital world, it's human attention. And like any scarce resource, it needs to be protected, cultivated, and used wisely. This means we need to develop what we could call mental hygiene in the same way we developed physical hygiene. Just as we learn to wash our hands to avoid infections, we need to learn practices to protect our mind from manipulation and informational contamination. This can include everything from simple techniques like checking sources and questioning our own emotional reactions to more sophisticated practices like meditation and regular reflection on our own thought patterns. But the solution cannot be only individual. We also need structural changes in how our society organizes the flow of information and attention. This can include regulations on algorithmic transparency, fundamental digital rights, and perhaps most importantly, educational systems that teach the skills necessary to consciously navigate the modern informational environment. Imagine a world where each person has the tools and knowledge necessary to consciously manage their own attention, where the algorithms that shape our experience are transparent and auditable, where there is real diversity of information sources instead of the illusion of diversity created by personalized echo chambers. This is not an impossible world. It's a world we can build if we make the right choices now. The fundamental question we face as a species is whether we will be able to develop our wisdom at the same speed we develop our technology. We have created incredibly powerful tools to capture, process, and direct human attention. But we have not yet developed the collective wisdom necessary to use these tools in ways that serve us instead of enslaving us. And perhaps this is the true evolutionary test of our era. Not whether our technology can become more sophisticated, we already know it can. The question is whether our consciousness can evolve fast enough to remain in control of the technology. Whether our capacity for internal self-governance can develop at the same speed as our capacity to create external systems of control. This is not a battle between humans and machines, as often portrayed in science fiction. It's a battle between different visions of what it means to be human. One vision sees us as passive consumers of stimuli, beings who can be predicted and controlled through the data we generate. The other sees us as conscious agents, capable of reflection, growth, and genuine choice. The vision that prevails depends on the decisions we make now as individuals and as a society. And here we arrive at an insight that may seem paradoxical. To preserve our humanity in the digital age, we need to become more human, not less technological. We need to cultivate exactly those capacities that distinguish us from machines. Our capacity for deep reflection, our ability to make creative connections between apparently disparate ideas, our capacity to feel genuine empathy and form meaningful relationships, our ability to find purpose and meaning even in the absence of constant external stimuli. Ironically, the very capacities we most need to develop to maintain our mental autonomy are those that our digital culture tends to atrophy. The capacity to sustain focused attention for long periods, tolerance for boredom and silence, patience for slow and deep reflection, the courage to form independent opinions even when they are not popular or validated by algorithms. But perhaps most important is rediscovering our capacity for genuine questioning. In the pre-digital world, asking the right questions was a valued skill because answers were scarce. Now we live flooded with answers to questions we never asked, and we've lost the art of formulating our own questions. Reclaiming our mental autonomy begins with reclaiming our right and capacity to ask our own questions instead of simply consuming the answers offered to us. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you are not alone. We live in a historical moment where questions that seem to belong only to philosophy and science fiction have become urgent practical dilemmas of daily life. By reflecting on these ideas, you are participating in a crucial conversation about the future of our species and about what kind of life we want to build in a world increasingly mediated by algorithms. If you wish to continue exploring these questions, consider joining those of us who are committed to developing a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities of our time. Subscribe to continue this essential dialogue about how to preserve and cultivate our humanity in an age of artificial intelligence and to build together the mental and ethical resources necessary to consciously navigate this new world we are creating, whether we want to or not. The future is not something that simply happens to us. It is something we create through our choices, individual and collective. And the most important choice we make every day is where we direct our attention. Because controlling attention is not just controlling what we think, it's controlling who we become. And that, perhaps, is the last frontier of human freedom we can still defend